Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Young with Matt Moore here today, and we're going to talk about the Great Reset versus NESARA. Coming right up. Okay, so we have, why are we asking this question about Great Reset and NESARA? Can you answer that just on a brief level? What's been happening?
So in essence, if anybody's been paying attention to the interwebs or even the financial system in general, historical cycles, there is a lot of evidence that change is coming. But there are multiple narratives out there about what that change could look like, what it's called, what are the ideas and principles involved in that change. So there is quite a difference. One is definitely more globalist, one is definitely more oppressive, and one is the other is more liberating.
So why do they? I mean, what are people feeling when they hear these questions? I mean, because you're hearing them just like I'm hearing them over and over again. We're answering the questions. It's really hard to do it on Twitter. I mean, you got 140 characters, and you're like,
sure.
And I can get a little information out, but what's going on? What's the undercurrent of the people with that?
So what I've noticed with the overall undercurrent of it is that people often get kind of confused because they hear words like the Great Reset, I mean, especially with the World Economic Forum, intentionally talking about it, having a website about it. I mean, the information is out there, the agenda's out there, people know it's
for coming. A long time.
For a long time. Yeah, in fact, it's so funny. Even The Economist magazine, I mean, if you're into the conspiracy stuff, I think it's quite ironic that I think it was back in the 70s or 80s, they had a cover, and it had a phoenix on it with an emblem around its chest that had a zero and that zero is kind of crossed out, and that phoenix is rising or standing on top of a bunch of fiat burning currency, a bunch of currency that's just burning, world currencies. And on the little emblem that's on the phoenix, it says 2018. So my thoughts is they knew that around this time that there was going to be some form of a monetary economic reset, okay?
Right.
And they were subconsciously projecting that agenda to us. However, had Hillary become president, there was probably a more highly likelihood that that agenda would have maybe been carried out closer to 2018 versus what we're seeing now. But I just think it's a little eerie that a lot of these cycles are also matching up with what has been projected from years ago. With the NESARA stuff, the ideas that are involved in that's a little bit more pertaining to each nation state and retaining sovereignty and personal sovereignty, whereas the Great Reset agenda is utilizing, both agendas are utilizing similar technologies that will be involved. However,
similar base, blockchain-y kind of, a digital currency, digital wallet kind of conversations related to your money with that.
Yep.
Which makes people go, oh, it's the mark of the beast.
Yep.
And I'm like, calm down, because as we've talked about here, if you've watched this channel, you've watched Matt's channel with that too, Crypto More with this, guys, you have to be calm in your spirit because God is in control.
Sure.
And when God is in control and he's figuring this stuff out, again, we always have to have the beast before we get the mark.
Yep.
Okay? And as long as you can't sit there and say Biden is the beast, which no one in their right mind would go there on that particular topic because, he's got stage 2 dementia. And don't tell me he doesn't. As long as he doesn't have that, then the reality is that's not the beast yet.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: God's in control. God gets to set who and when the exact time frame of the Antichrist. He is setting him up.
And wouldn't you agree, Scott, based off of what you know, that when you look at the Great Reset and you look at NESARA, the ideas behind NESARA, whether it's called NESARA or not, is not only about retaining personal and financial sovereignty, national sovereignty, but is putting the individual in a much better financial place. But the ideas of NESARA are they aid to the idea of real, true capitalism. Not
Yes.
saying that there's not going to be international trade, because there most certainly will be,
Better be.
and there'll be free markets.
Right.
But the Great Reset is using a facade of globalism, of crony capitalism with elements of socialism that benefit more an elite few than it does the general public. Even though they are going to sell the idea that it's going to equalize everything, that it's going to make everything fair, social justice, reform, they're going to use all these key words. I mean, wouldn't you agree that these are some of the two very big differences between the systems?
Yeah, and I think the easy thing for us to look at is you know, I want you to just see on this side of this table, you've got nationalism versus globalism. That's the key that you need to do. Align yourself and saying, you know, hey, listen, when you think of globalism, you're talking about Great Reset. When you're thinking of nationalism, you're talking about NESARA, or National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act. And it's because NESARA has been under wraps for a very long time, and it's only come out literally within about a year. So there's very little information about this, and we'll talk a little bit more about some things, resources we can kind of give you to help you look at this. So that's one area that we have to deal with. By the way, I want to just back up one hair. One of the things, and I've been hearing this a lot, is, well, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. And I've heard people say that to you and me, and privately, and can I just tell you where conspiracy theory, the word, actually comes from? It comes from the time of JFK's killing, that the Warren Commission actually was trying to shoot down the other people who had, because the magic bullet theory, all the other silliness related to the Warren, you know, Commission, and all the other things that were just wrong about the way that happened, trying to put it into this extremely tight box that just literally couldn't happen. What they actually came up with, the idea, the concept, phraseology, brought up then, and just said, we marginalize you by conspiracy theory. And the answer is, hey, listen, I don't want to come up with conspiracy theories. I've heard people say conspiracy theories, that a whole bunch of different people, like Mama Cass and a whole bunch of these, I mean, literally a list of people, 20, 30, 40 people that had died, you know, years ago.
Sure.
Chris Farley,
Sure.
They're all alive. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's going a little far.
Sure.
You know, I don't want to go too silly on this thing, but what we're talking about is reality. So don't let people knock your faith in the teeth by throwing out this thing called conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Because just by kicking out a word doesn't mean that it invalidates it.
No, and I agree. I mean, I think you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to have discernment. You have to sift through this stuff. And the things that I think Scott is talking about is finding those elements of truth that are based in facts that you can find, ideas that have been around, that that not only correlate historically with different cycles, but there's more to it than just a claim without any real substance. A lot of times you can, in this conspiracy realm, you can find claims or ideas that have a lot of substance and are based on a lot of fact. And what people will automatically generalize as a conspiracy theory is
right.
They'll be maybe on the edges or the outskirts of those ideas or subjects, maybe some things that aren't quite rooted into something substantial where you can actually feel, touch, verify.
Exactly.
And so it's like if you don't take the time to even just listen and consume and consider an idea, that's part of critical thinking.
Yeah.
And anybody needs
right.
to apply critical thinking to all this.
Yeah, Matt and I like to debate things.
Yeah.
And you'll like pitch out something, and I have lots of people that I do this with, and it's okay. It's not, and you don't have to do it emotionally. I mean, we had a whole bunch of kids from ORE. We had 50 kids in our house last night. I'm a little tired because I had they left about 1, 2 or something like that, and it was like. And it was really cool. Instead of emotionalism, we just had some really kind of cool conversations about politics and other things that are going on around us, and that's actually healthy. Okay, and so don't let your friends or other family members, beat you up about the conspiracy thing. But let's talk about. I mean, let's get a little bit more basic because I'm already feeling like we're going to do
Sure.
another video here in a second. We'll kind of do a second part. Why do you have to have NESARA versus Great Reset?
Why do we need it?
Why does the money have to be changed over?
Okay, well, the money is going to be changed over anyways. Everybody knows that if you look at the monetary cycles, and I actually, exactly a year ago, I was in the state senate and I was talking to the state senators at an interim study, showing them charts of all of these monetary cycles and fundamentals that were showing that not only a recession was coming, but that our monetary system was on the verge of going through a change within our lifetime.
Right.
Now, I wasn't poo-pooing a lot of these policy ideas that Trump was doing or talking about, tax cuts, getting rid of regulations. All those things are great. And the analogy that I made is that if you have a wonderful house and a wonderful house builder, and you build this grand house on top of a foundation that's sinking every year,
right,
all your work is in vain. So in order to sustain that good house, you have to build a new foundation.
Right.
And based on debt cycles, these monetary cycles I was talking about, with fiat money, world reserve currency, all these patterns that you can find, they were all coming to a collision point within this time frame.
Yep.
And that's why you see organizations like the World Economic Forum, the IMF, all talking about it, because they even know that the system that they currently have in place is unsustainable and it has to be reset. So the question I ask to you is, who do you want in the seats of power when this restructuring or reset happens? Because there's really two paths that we can go down, one that's going to be super oppressive and one that's going to be very liberating.
Yeah, and I think that's a powerful point that we got to look at. If you go onto Twitter and type in hashtag end the Fed, you're going to see a ton of this information, right? And basically that's the backdrop. I want you to think about the end the Fed is gonna come. Now, how they accomplish end the Fed is related to that NESARA versus Great Reset kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if Hillary had been in office in 2016, Hillary would have accelerated toward the Great Reset.
Yeah.
And so we would be feeling that because the debt cycle is too oppressive.
Yep. And you know what happens most of the time when you look at history and you look at these cycles? Every time there's a great transition, there's a great crisis.
Right.
Okay? Especially war often being one of them.
Yep.
However, this last crisis that we had is a pandemic, right? And they're utilizing this narrative. They're utilizing these ideas of, this is the new normal. This is how things are going to change. More digital, more working from remotely, getting used to these new changes. And so it's like they've got to have a reason,
right,
in order to reset the system. So it's order out of chaos. Cause a problem to usher in the solution. And most of the time when you see these monumental shifts in how the world works and how the financial system works or the monetary system works, there's often this eerily correlation with
Yep.
the major world events. Now, you could call it a giant coincidence, you could call it providence, or you could call it an elite group guiding the herd of people to a certain pathway. I mean, that's why it's so important to critically think, Scott.
Right. And I think as we do that, and we're asking these questions, you need to be asking these questions because they're going to affect you. I mean, they're going to affect every single one of us in ways. And so, I ask you to respond as a believer in Christ, to respond in faith. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the promise of things unseen. When you respond in faith in that way, what you'll find is a calmness that comes on. Do you know that we are right today is the 7th of November, and they've just called the election for Biden in some ways, and all this stuff is happening. I have no scariness in myself. you know, you don't either.
No, no, I don't.
And so that's the case. So I want to end up this little thing. We're going to talk a little bit about two different books here. So there are two books that are available for us here. So Matt has Foundations in Liberty that you can go on to
Amazon. Yep.
Amazon, and where can you exactly get it?
So you could type in Foundations for Liberty,
Yep.
Matthew Moore on Amazon,
Yep.
or you could go to mattjmoore.com. I talk a lot about these ideas about liberty, how to sustain it, and then also the monetary system and a lot of these cycles and historical periods that I mentioned briefly.
Right, and then secondarily, I mean, and this is just as easy a book to read. It's called NESARA and the Mark of the Beast. No, NESARA is not the Mark of the Beast, but that was trying to point the point right in there. But I think these two kind of books, you know, that I have, mine's at drscottyoung.com, and you can kind of get these. And I think these two books are helpful for people to kind of look at some of this part of the reset with that too. Part of that circumstance. So next video, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the Great Reset, really deep. But we had to give you that first basic dive. We'll do the reset, and we'll also do a little bit more about NESARA. So thanks for listening to us. You can go to mattjmoore.com. You can go to drscottyoung.com, and we just appreciate you listening to us. Thanks so much.